I still remember the sound of her key in my door. Not a knock, not a doorbell, a key. Her key. The one my husband gave her years ago when we were newlyweds and too naive to understand what we were inviting into our lives. It was a Saturday morning, 7 years after I'd asked her, no, begged her, to leave us alone. 7 years after she'd walked out of this house with her nose in the air, telling me I'd regret pushing her away. 7 years after she promised my husband that one day I'd be gone and she'd be right back where she belonged. And there she was, standing in my kitchen, in the home I rebuilt, in the life I salvaged from the wreckage she left behind, looking around like she owned the place, like she'd never left, like those 7 years of silence were just nothing. But here's what she didn't know. Here's what she couldn't have possibly understood as she stood there with that familiar, condescending smile on her face. This wasn't the same house anymore. And I wasn't the same woman. What happened next? It shocked everyone, including her. Especially her. Let me take you back, because you need to understand how we got here. You need to know what she did to me, what she tried to turn me into before you can appreciate the moment she realized she'd lost. My name is Dorothy. I married Michael 15 years ago. I was 23, fresh out of college, stupidly in love, and absolutely terrified of his mother. Catherine, that's her name, though for years I could barely say it without my stomach churning. She was 63 when we got married, a widow of 5 years, and the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. You know the type. The ones who say, "Bless your heart," but mean you're an idiot. From day one, she made it clear. I wasn't good enough for her son, not pretty enough, not accomplished enough, not her enough. She'd actually told Michael, in front of me at our engagement dinner, that he should take his time before committing because sometimes what glitters isn't gold. I remember laughing awkwardly, looking at Michael to defend me, and watching him just nod. Just agree with his mother like I wasn't sitting right there, like my heart wasn't cracking down the middle. But I loved him. God help me, I loved him so much I convinced myself it would get better. It didn't. The first year of marriage, Catherine visited 3 times a week. Unannounced, of course. She'd let herself in, rearrange my kitchen cabinets because they made no sense. Comment on the dust I'd apparently missed. Critique the meals I'd cooked and always find a reason to pull Michael aside for a private conversation. I'd hear them murmuring in the next room, her voice sugary sweet, his voice defensive, and when he'd come back, he'd be irritated with me, like I'd done something wrong just by existing in the same space as his mother. She criticized everything. My cooking was too bland. My cleaning wasn't thorough enough. My job as a teacher? Oh, how sweet a teacher. Well, not everyone can be a doctor like Michael. She'd say it with that smile, that goddamn smile that made you feel 2 inches tall. But the worst part? The absolute worst part was how she tried to replace me. When I got pregnant with our first child, Emma, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would change. Maybe becoming a grandmother would soften her. Maybe she'd see me as family finally. I was so wrong. Catherine descended on us like a storm the day we brought Emma home from the hospital. She practically shoved me aside to hold the baby, cooing and rocking her, while I stood there, exhausted and bleeding and invisible. She stayed for 2 weeks to help, which meant taking over every single aspect of caring for my daughter while treating me like an incompetent child. Don't hold her like that, Dorothy. You'll hurt her neck. That's not how you burp a baby, dear. Here, let me show you. Oh, you're breastfeeding. Well, I suppose that's trendy now. I used formula with Michael and he turned out just fine. Every single thing I did was wrong, and Michael, he just let it happen. He'd come home from the hospital where he worked those long shifts, and instead of checking on me, he'd go straight to his mother. "Thanks for helping, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you." I started to disappear in my own home. I was the mother, but she was the mommy. I was the wife, but she was the woman Michael actually listened to. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to feed Emma and find Catherine already there, bottle in hand, whispering, "Shh, Grandma's here. Grandma will take care of you." It felt like theft, like she was stealing my daughter from me one lullaby at a time. But I didn't say anything, not then, because I was drowning in postpartum depression and exhaustion and the terrible, crushing fear that maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe Emma was better off with her. Things got worse when Jake was born 3 years later. By then, Catherine had a key to our house. She'd show up whenever she wanted, let herself in, and take over. If I tried to set boundaries, "Catherine, please call before you come over." She'd look at me with such wounded surprise, like I'd slapped her. And then she'd turn to Michael with tears in her eyes and say, "I just want to help. I just want to be close to my grandchildren. Is that so wrong?" And Michael, God bless his spineless soul, would side with her every time. "She's just trying to help, Dorothy. Why are you being so difficult? She's my mother. She's not going anywhere." I felt like I was going insane, like I was the villain in my own life, like wanting to be a mother to my own children was somehow selfish and cruel. Catherine would take the kids to the park without telling me. She'd buy them clothes and toys without asking what I thought. She'd make decisions about their schedules, their meals, their bedtimes, decisions that were mine to make, and then act shocked when I got upset. "I'm just being a grandmother, Dorothy. Isn't that what you want?" No, it wasn't. I wanted to be their mother. I wanted my husband to defend me. I wanted to feel like I mattered in my own family, but I didn't matter. Not to Michael, not when his mother was involved. The breaking point came on Jake's second birthday. I'd been planning his party for weeks. I'd made the cake from scratch, decorated the house, invited all our friends and family. I was so excited. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to give my son a beautiful memory. And then Catherine showed up early with a bakery cake. A massive, expensive, professional cake with Jake's name spelled out in blue frosting. "I just thought we should have a backup," she said sweetly, setting it on my kitchen counter right next to the cake I'd spent hours making. In case yours didn't turn out." I stared at that store-bought cake, and something inside me just snapped. "Get out." The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Quiet at first, then louder. "Get out." Catherine's face went pale. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get out of my house. Now." She looked at Michael, who was standing there with his mouth open, completely frozen. "Michael, are you going to let her speak to me like this?" And for once in our entire marriage, I didn't wait for him to answer. I didn't wait for him to choose. I turned to him with tears streaming down my face, and I said the words I should have said years ago. "If she doesn't leave right now, I will, and I'm taking the kids with me." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Emma was clutching her grandmother's leg, looking confused. Jake was in his high chair, covered in frosting, oblivious. And Catherine was staring at me like I just committed murder. "You would keep me from my grandchildren?" Her voice was shaking. "You would do that to them, to Michael?" "You did this to yourself," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You never respected me. You never respected my role as their mother, and I'm done. I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done feeling like a guest in my own life. I turned to Michael. Choose, right now, me or her. And God, the look on his face, the agony, like I was asking him to cut off his own arm, like choosing his wife and the mother of his children was some impossible, unreasonable demand. He looked at his mother, then at me, then back at her, and he said, "Mom, maybe you should go." Catherine's face crumpled. She looked destroyed, genuinely, utterly destroyed. And for a split second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then she gathered herself, straightened her spine, and looked at me with such pure hatred that it made my blood run cold. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "You'll push everyone away with that attitude, Dorothy. And one day, when you're all alone, you'll realize what you've lost." She turned to Michael. "I'll be waiting. When she's gone, I'll be here for you and those babies, like I always have been." And then she left, took her bakery cake with her, walked out of our house and out of our lives. For a while, anyway. The first few months after that birthday were strange, quiet, like the air itself was lighter. I could breathe again in my own home. I could make decisions without second-guessing myself. I could be a mother without someone hovering over my shoulder, correcting every move I made. But Michael was different. Sad, resentful. He'd agreed to ask his mother to leave, but he hadn't really chosen me. Not in his heart. He called her constantly. He'd take the kids to visit her without telling me. He'd come home and mention, casually, how much she missed us, how hurt she was, how I had broken her heart, like I was the villain, like I'd done something unforgivable by demanding basic respect in my own home. We fought constantly, terrible, screaming fights that ended with slammed doors and cold silences. Emma started having nightmares. Jake became clingy and anxious. I was drowning again, but this time in guilt and anger and the horrible realization that my marriage might not survive this. One night, about 6 months after Catherine left, Michael came home late from work. He sat down at the kitchen table, wouldn't look at me, and said, "I think we should separate." My heart stopped, just stopped. "What?" "I can't do this anymore, Dorothy. The fighting, the tension, the kids are miserable. You're miserable. I'm miserable. So fix it," I said, my voice breaking. "Go to therapy with me. Fight for this marriage. Fight for us." "I'm tired of fighting," he said quietly. "I'm tired of being caught in the middle." "There is no middle, Michael. There's your wife and children, and there's your mother, and you've never fully chosen us, not once." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were empty. Just hollow. "Maybe that's the problem," he said. "Maybe I can't." And that was it. That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. We separated 2 weeks later. Michael moved into an apartment across town. We tried counseling, half-hearted, painful sessions where he mostly stared at the wall while I cried and begged him to try harder, but it was useless. His mother had already won. She'd planted herself so deeply into his psyche that he couldn't imagine a life where she wasn't the center of everything. The divorce was finalized a year later. I got primary custody of the kids. Michael got weekends and holidays. And Catherine? She swooped right back in, of course. Suddenly, Michael's apartment was decorated with her touches. She was there every time he had the kids, playing the role of the devoted grandmother, the supportive mother, the woman who'd been so wronged by the terrible wife who couldn't appreciate family. But here's the thing. Here's what she didn't anticipate. I wasn't broken. I was free. The first year after the divorce was hell, I won't lie to you. I cried myself to sleep most nights. I doubted every decision I'd made. I wondered if I'd destroyed my children's lives by refusing to just Submit. By refusing to let Catherine run my life. But slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed at first, things started to get better. I got a promotion at work, started teaching advanced classes, mentoring new teachers, finding joy in my career again. I made new friends. Real friends who didn't judge me, who didn't tell me I should have just tried harder with my marriage. I started therapy and finally addressed the anxiety and depression that had been crushing me for years. And most importantly, I became the mother I'd always wanted to be. Without Catherine's constant interference, I found my footing. I learned to trust my instincts. Emma and Jake started to see me as their safe place, their rock, the parent who was consistent and present and actually listened to them. Yes, they saw their father and grandmother on weekends, but when they came home to me, to stability, to a house filled with laughter and art projects, and bedtime stories that weren't interrupted by someone else's agenda. I rebuilt everything she'd tried to take from me, piece by piece, day by day. And then, 3 years into my divorce, I met David. David was nothing like Michael. He was a teacher, too, high school English, and he had this quiet confidence, this gentleness that made me feel seen, really, truly seen. He didn't have a domineering mother. He didn't have baggage about family dynamics. He just liked me, for me. We dated for 2 years before I introduced him to the kids. I was so careful, so protective of them and of what we'd built. But when I finally did introduce them, it was perfect. David didn't try to be their father. He didn't try to replace Michael. He just showed up, played board games with Emma, helped Jake with his homework, made us all laugh at dinner. Emma told me one night, curled up on the couch, "I like David, Mom. He makes you smile." And God, those words, those simple, honest words from my 10-year-old daughter, they healed something in me I didn't even know was broken. David proposed on a beach at sunset, just the two of us, and I said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small ceremony with our closest friends and family. Emma and Jake stood beside me, grinning in their fancy clothes, and when David said his vows, he included them. Promised to be their friend, their supporter, their steady presence. Michael wasn't there, obviously. He'd remarried by then, too. A quiet woman named Lisa, who Catherine apparently tolerated because she knew her place. But he sent a text message wishing me well, which was more than I expected. Catherine, of course, sent nothing. I'd heard through mutual friends that she was furious about my remarriage, furious that I was happy, furious that I'd moved on while she and Michael were still nursing their wounds. But I didn't care. For the first time in over a decade, her opinion didn't matter to me. I was free. I was happy. I was whole. 4 years into my marriage with David, something shifted with Michael. He started calling more, not to argue or to bring up old grievances, but to actually talk about the kids, about their soccer games and school plays and report cards. He asked my opinion on things. He deferred to my judgment. It was like he'd finally realized that I was a good mother, that I'd always been a good mother. One afternoon, he showed up at my door to drop off the kids after his weekend. David was at work. The kids ran inside to play, and Michael lingered on the porch, shifting his weight awkwardly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. I crossed my arms, wary. "Sure." He took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one, for everything, for how I treated you, for choosing my mother over my family, over you." I stared at him, genuinely shocked. "What brought this on?" "Therapy," he admitted with a weak laugh. "And Lisa, she's helped me see things more clearly. How toxic my relationship with my mom was, how unfair I was to you." Michael. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to accept his apology and move on. Another part wanted to scream at him for all the years he'd stolen from me. "You don't have to forgive me," he said quickly. I just, I needed you to know. You were right about everything." He left after that, and I stood on my porch for a long time, processing. It felt like closure, like the final piece of a painful puzzle clicking into place. But the story doesn't end there, because 7 years after that birthday party, 7 years after Catherine walked out of my house with her threat hanging in the air, she came back. It was a Saturday morning early spring. David had taken Emma and Jake to their soccer games. I was home alone, drinking coffee and reading, enjoying the rare quiet. And then I heard it. A key in the lock. My heart jumped. I stood up confused as the front door opened. And there she was, Catherine. 70 years old now, thinner than I remembered, but with that same sharp look in her eyes. She stepped inside like she owned the place, looked around my redecorated living room, David's artwork on the walls, photos of our blended family everywhere, and her expression soured. "Dorothy," she said coolly, as if we'd just spoken yesterday. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "What are you doing here?" "I still have a key," she said, holding it up. That old key, the one I'd forgotten existed. Michael gave it to me years ago. "That was to a different house," I said, my voice shaking. "We moved. How did you—" "Michael gave me this address." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I thought it was time we talked." "Get out." The words came automatically, protective fury rising in my chest. "Oh, don't be dramatic." She walked further into my house, uninvited, unwelcome. "I've come to see my grandchildren. It's been too long." "You don't get to do this," I said, following her. "You don't get to just show up after 7 years and act like nothing happened." She turned to face me, and there was something in her expression. Triumph, maybe. Vindication. "I told you, didn't I? I told you that you'd regret pushing me away. And here we are. Michael told me all about your little arrangement. How he's finally in therapy, finally seeing things clearly. I thought maybe now that some time has passed, we could start over. For the children's sake." I laughed. Actually laughed. A bitter, incredulous sound that made her flinch. "Start over?" "Catherine, do you have any idea what you put me through? What you tried to do to me?" "I was trying to help." "No." I cut her off, my voice hard. "You were trying to replace me. You wanted me gone so you could play mother to my children. You poisoned my marriage. You made me doubt myself, doubt my worth, doubt everything. And when I finally stood up to you, you promised I'd end up alone. And yet here you are," she said softly, looking around. "In a new house, with a new husband. You got everything you wanted." "Yes," I said, "I did. Because I fought for it. Because I refused to let you destroy me." Catherine's face tightened. "The children need their grandmother." "No," I said firmly. "They need stability. They need healthy relationships. They need people in their lives who respect boundaries and don't try to undermine their mother." "I made mistakes," she said, and for the first time she sounded tired. "I can admit that now, but I love those children. I deserve a relationship with them." "That's not up to you," I said. "That's up to Emma and Jake. They're 12 and 9 now, old enough to make their own decisions about who they want in their lives." "They're too young to understand." "No." I interrupted her again, stepping closer. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide anything anymore, Catherine. This is my house, my family, my life, and you are not welcome here." She stared at me, and I watched something shift in her eyes. Realization, maybe, or just the dawning understanding that she had no power here, that 7 years was too long, that the woman standing in front of her wasn't the scared, desperate young mother she'd tormented all those years ago. I was someone else now, someone stronger, someone whole. "I think you should leave," I said quietly, "and I'd like that key back." For a long moment she didn't move. Then slowly she reached into her purse and pulled out the key, placed it in my outstretched hand. "You'll regret this," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice, just defeat. "I regret a lot of things," I told her, "but standing up to you will never be one of them." She turned and walked toward the door, paused with her hand on the handle. "They ask about me, you know," she said without looking back. "Emma and Jake. Michael says they ask why they don't see Grandma anymore." My heart clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "Then Michael can explain to them what happened. He can tell them the truth. And if they want to reach out to you when they're older, when they can make informed decisions, that's their choice. But I won't force them. And I won't let you manipulate them the way you manipulated us." Catherine opened the door. The morning sunlight streamed in, making her look smaller somehow, older, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "I just wanted to be needed," she whispered. And despite everything, despite all the pain and anger and years of therapy, I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. "I know," I said, "but you can't build your worth on controlling other people. That's not love, Catherine, that's fear." She left without another word, walked down my driveway, got into her car, and drove away. I stood in the doorway, holding that old key, watching her disappear down the street. And then I went inside, locked the door, and called a locksmith. When David and the kids came home that afternoon, I told them what happened. Emma and Jake were quiet for a while, processing. Then Emma asked, "Do you think we should talk to her?" "I think that's up to you," I said carefully. "When you're ready, if you're ready, but it has to be on your terms, not hers." Jake looked thoughtful. "Does she still have that big cookie jar? The one shaped like a bear?" I smiled despite myself. "Probably." "Maybe we could visit sometime," he said, "just for cookies, and then leave." Emma laughed. "Jake, you can't just visit someone for their cookies." "Why not?" he said innocently, and we all laughed. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, David held me while I cried. Not sad tears, not angry tears, just release. The final cathartic release of something I'd been carrying for over a decade. "You did good," he murmured into my hair. "You protected your peace, your family." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "She looked so lost." "That's not your responsibility," he said firmly. "You offered her a relationship. She wanted control instead. That was her choice." He was right. I knew he was right, but still. Michael called me a few days later, apologized profusely for giving his mother our address, said he'd thought she just wanted to send a card. I believed him, mostly. "She's not well," he told me. Emotionally, I mean. Her therapist says she has issues with attachment and control. Apparently, after Dad died, she kind of latched onto me and the grandkids as her whole identity. "I figured," I said, "but that doesn't excuse what she did." "I know, trust me, I know." There was a pause, then, "Dorothy, thank you." "For what?" "For being strong enough to set boundaries when I wasn't. For protecting Emma and Jake. For being a better parent than I was a husband." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "Take care of yourself, Michael." "You too." A year later, Emma asked if we could have lunch with her grandmother, just the two of them. Woman to woman, she said, which made me laugh because she was 13 and thought she was so grown up. I said yes, because it was her choice, her relationship to navigate. They met at a cafe downtown. I waited in the car, anxious, protective, ready to intervene if needed. But when Emma came out an hour later, she was smiling. "How was it?" I asked. "Weird," she admitted. But okay, she apologized, said she wished she'd been a better grandmother, asked if we could start over. "What did you tell her?" Emma looked at me with those wise old soul eyes she'd somehow developed. "I told her we could try, but that you're my mom, and David's my stepdad, and she doesn't get to have an opinion about that." Pride swelled in my chest. "What did she say?" "She said she understood." Emma paused. "I don't know if she meant it, but I guess we'll see." Jake decided he wasn't ready yet. "Maybe next year," he said. "Maybe when he was older and could understand better." And that was okay too, because healing doesn't have a timeline. Forgiveness doesn't come with a deadline. And family, real family, is built on respect, not obligation. It's been 2 years since Catherine showed up at my door with that key. 2 years since I watched her drive away, defeated and small. She sees Emma once a month now. They have lunch, talk about school and friends and normal grandmother-granddaughter things. Jake joined them a few times. It's cordial, careful, nothing like the toxic enmeshment of before. Catherine sends birthday cards, doesn't show up uninvited, doesn't criticize, doesn't try to control. And when Emma comes home from those lunches, she talks about how sad her grandmother seems, how lonely, how she keeps talking about the old days when the kids were little. "I feel bad for her," Emma told me once, "but I also get why you did what you did, why you had to push her away." "Do you resent me for it?" I asked, needing to know. "No," Emma said firmly. "You protected us. You protected yourself. That's what moms do." That's what moms do. God, those words. I think about Catherine sometimes, about how desperate she must have been to be needed, about how losing her husband broke something in her that she tried to fix by controlling her son, her grandchildren, me. I think about how different things could have been if she'd just respected me, if she'd been a partner instead of a rival, if she'd understood that love isn't a competition. But mostly I think about how far I've come. I'm 42 now. I have a career I'm proud of, a husband who sees me as an equal, 2 teenagers who are growing into remarkable humans, a home filled with laughter and safety and the quiet, confidence that comes from knowing your worth. Catherine tried to replace me. She tried to erase me from my own life to make herself the center of my family's universe. But when she came back 7 years later, when she walked into that house with her old key and her expectations, she found a woman who no longer needed her approval. She found a family that had healed without her. She found a life that had blossomed in her absence. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not revenge, not bitterness, just moving on. Just building something beautiful out of the rubble someone else created. Sometimes people don't get to come back. Sometimes the bridge they burned can't be rebuilt. And that's not cruelty, that's consequence. Catherine lost her place in our lives because she never respected that it wasn't hers to claim. She lost her grandchildren's unconditional love because she prioritized control over connection. She lost her son's blind loyalty because he finally grew up and saw the damage she'd done. And she lost me, her favorite target, her rival, her scapegoat, because I finally learned that I deserved better. If you're reading this, if you're listening to my story and seeing pieces of your own life in it, I want you to know something. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You don't have to sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort. You don't have to let toxic people live rent-free in your head, your home, or your heart just because they're family. It took me 15 years to learn that lesson. 15 years of pain and doubt and sleepless nights. 15 years of wondering if I was the problem, if I was too sensitive, too demanding, too unwilling to compromise. But I wasn't the problem, and neither are you. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Protecting your children isn't selfish. Demanding respect in your own home isn't unreasonable. And when someone tells you you'll regret standing up for yourself, when they promise you'll end up alone, unloved, punished for your defiance, prove them wrong. Build a life so full of joy and love and authentic connection that their absence becomes a relief, not a loss. Show them, and more importantly, show yourself that you were never the weak link they thought you were, that you were always strong enough to survive without them, that you were always worthy of the respect they refused to give. 7 years. That's how long it took for Catherine to realize she'd lost. That's how long I spent building a life she couldn't touch. And when she finally came back, key in hand, ready to reclaim her place, she found a house that no longer needed her, a family that no longer feared her, and a woman who no longer doubted her own worth. That right there, that's the victory. Not the drama of that confrontation, not the satisfaction of watching her leave, but the quiet, powerful knowledge that I survived, that I thrived, that I became the person I was always meant to be, despite her, not because of her. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for witnessing my pain and my healing and the long, difficult journey from doormat to door closer. If this resonated with you, if you've ever fought to stay sane in a toxic family dynamic, if you've ever had to choose yourself when everyone told you that made you selfish, you're not alone. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of survival, stories of courage, stories that remind us that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to shrink, because we all deserve to take up space in our own lives, and anyone who makes us feel otherwise, they don't get a key to our door, not anymore, not ever again.